So to complement the Oxford interview video, I ask you guys to submit your questions and your concerns about the Oxford interview, and this is the consequence of all of those comments. Harshil has asked an excellent question because I really like these types of questions. So he asked, how do I deal with questions in philosophy interviews that say something along the lines of, how do you know that Canada exists if you have not visited it? How do you recommend answering these kinds of wacky questions? Now, with these types of questions, you can apply the same method that I mentioned before about taking the problem that you're trying to solve and breaking it down into parts. For instance, how do you know that something exists in general? Try think of a broader problem that's easier for you to solve. Okay, so why do you guys think that I actually exist? Well, I make videos, so clearly something's acting on the physical world to create this conversation, otherwise this wouldn't be happening. But then that begs the question, how do you know about things in your physical world? You know about them through your senses, your sight, your smell, your hearing, your touch. But if that's the case, then what about things like dreams? In those types of situations, we would say that they don't exist, but sometimes we think that they are reality. So then that begs the question that even if you had visited Canada, you still might not think Canada exists. Or you might decide to take the route that, well, I know Canada exists because it's on the map, thousands and millions of other people have said that Canada exists, thus I can, beyond reasonable doubt, say that Canada exists. It doesn't matter which line you take, it just matters how you defend the line that you do take and how you reformulate the line that you do take. Just break down the problem and address one specific aspect of it. For instance, what are the criteria for something to exist? And then define your criteria and then say, well, I know it exists, or rather I know it doesn't exist for these reasons. Then the tutor will definitely come back with a challenge to your proposal, and then you reformulate it and refine it. Callum asked, how did I prepare for my Oxford interview in the weeks beforehand? What did I do? I read through my personal statement again to make sure I actually knew what it was I was talking about. I also made some notes on the books that I'd read before, so I quickly read through them to be familiar with the text that I read, because some of them I read at the beginning of the summer, and it'd been a couple of months since then. I also tried to take the little arguments and just brainstorm points of them, like this argument doesn't work for this reason, or this particular thing in this argument is ambiguous. How do I bring clarity to it? For the economics interview, I just made sure I knew how to differentiate, integrate things, and just generally interpret data, which was like looking at graphs and being like, oh, okay, no, I understand what this graph is showing. This axis is like population and this axis is time. So as time increases, the population fluctuates, and this gradient of this line means this, and this gradient here means that. And if I integrated this function, what would that actually give me? It was just things like that, things that made me think about problems in different ways and challenge the way that I think about problems. During the time I was actually in Oxford, however, I spent the majority of my time playing Angry Birds and also just talking to other people who were there for interview. I don't want to stress myself out by doing lots and lots and lots of work, so I just kind of chilled and was like, okay, I don't want to fry my brain because the interview is going to be intellectually stimulating enough. I'm going to chill, and that made me have a very clear mind and focus on the interview itself and make sure I was present there as opposed to being tired and worried and having all this knowledge crammed into my head. Of course, that's how I do things. That might not be how you do things. Just do whatever you think is most sensible to allow you to shine brightest. Callum also asked, when you arrive for interviews, are there also people there to help you out and show you around and help you settle in? Yes, there is. There's an entire team for every single college of volunteers, of current Oxford students who will be there to show you to your room, tell you when your interview is, answer any questions you have. They'll probably be arranging some entertainment for you, which took the form of going to an ice cream place and watching films and going up the tower and going for walks, and you can participate as much as you want in these activities. They aren't like babysitting you, you are an adult and you're respected as that, but there are tons of things that you can be getting involved with, and they are there to help you and make sure your interview experience runs as smoothly as possible. Michael has asked what questions would be good to ask the tutors at the end of the interview. My advice here is, if you have a question that only the tutor can answer in that particular moment in time, then ask them. Like, if you're going to be asking them where is the closest bathroom, don't ask them, because you could just ask one of the helpers, and that way you're kind of cutting into their more valuable time, because they've got to get through all the other people who are there for interview as well. However, if you wanted to know the name of a particular author that they recommended during the interview because you wanted to check them out genuinely, then yeah, sure, ask that question. Hannah has asked, do I know anything about economics interviews? Funnily enough, yes. Economics is a very broad field. It can go into, say, choice theory or game theory or analysing data or your maths skills, so the questions they ask you can jump in and out of all those different areas. For instance, my economics interview was split into two 10-minute sections. The first section was all about choice theory and thinking through problems, so I was discussing Pascal's wager, which I didn't realise was Pascal's wager at the time, and he just proposed it to me and asked me, do you think that this is a fair model for deciding whether or not we should go to heaven or hell, or rather whether we should believe in God or not? Then we talked through that and I started criticising it, then he started refining the model, and then we started discussing infinities and the size of those infinities, and eventually that interview came to an abrupt halt because it was the next person who was interviewing me's turn to speak. I was presented with the graph and I was told that the graph shows spending over the course of a couple of years, and I was asked to explain why do I think that the graph fluctuates over time. And then I was also told, okay, so how would you calculate the rate at which spending was increasing at a particular moment in time? And then I was also asked, okay, so how would you go about, say, calculating the amount of spending that was taking place between two time periods? Obviously, these were disguised maths questions. She wanted me to say, well, I differentiate this particular thing, or I would integrate this particular thing, but it wasn't exactly clear. So the test was whether or not I could draw the line between these two dots. Hopefully that gives you an insight into what an economics interview is like. It's just testing your ability to analyse data and interpret it intuitively, and also your ability to think about problems in a rational way. So that's all the questions. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that this video gave you a better insight into what it is like to do an Oxbridge interview. Please do post any comments, questions or feedback down in the comments section below, and I will see you next Sunday, subscribers, or rather odd socks. Hashi was asked an excellent question because I really like these types of questions. So he asked, how do I deal with questions in philosophy interviews that say something along the lines of, how do you know that candor exists if you're not in this case, how do you recommend these kinds of